Hey everybody. Okay, I'm recording this in a major crazy wind deal. I hope the audio is okay, but you'll probably hear the wind. It's banging pretty hard. Whew, almost sideways. Anyway, I decided to do a video this week on one of the most common questions I get when people stop and talk to me. And that question is, do you like this lifestyle? Along with, how long have you been doing this? That question is top tier, right up there with where do you go to the bathroom, I'm not going to do a video about the bathroom thing. Anyway, so I thought I'd give you a little history as far as my experience with van life, as it were. So to go way back in terms of what has made me for a long time a really good candidate for van life, being, in my mind, someone who is really comfortable with minimal space, very simple living, unconventional living, etc. Goes all the way back to my early childhood. Grew up through a lot of really challenging childhood stuff with step parents and such and things. And I became my safe space was in my room. I closed the door, I'd create my art, I'd do my things. I became I'm naturally kind of an introvert, but I became much more so when I was living with an abusive stepfather for a few years. And along those lines, even before he came along, I had fallen in love with trucks, big long haul trucks, 18-wheelers. And I had some really romantic ideas about what it must be like to live in a truck, sleep in a sleeper, traveling for days on end, etc., sort of thing. And a lot of my art from that era, I'm drawing trucks. I just loved them. I could tell you every one, Kenworth, Peterbilt, Freightliner, White, Mack, Diamond T, you name it, Marmon, I had them down in a flash, and that was my passion. I'd mail away for brochures from all those companies, and get them and be so excited. I built model trucks. Anyway, I loved the idea of the freedom of being mobile and having everything you need to survive and live right in your rig. Even to a point that when I was, I think it was about 14, I built a full-size Freightliner cab in my bedroom. This was during the horrible stepfather years, so I could literally fantasize I'm in a truck. I'm not in this fucked up deal. I get to my room, retreat to my room, turn on my music real soft, and I'd sit in that cab I'd built. Literally, this was full size. Built out of cardboard I'd scavenged. Found an old truck steering wheel. I hung out at the truck stop in town. I got some parts here and there. And yeah, so it's safe to say I've loved the idea of vehicle living for a long time for a lot of different reasons. Anyway, fast forward to post-high school. A few years after high school, I went to school for photography at the Art Institute of Seattle, 2-year program. I went there from 87 to 89, and so I graduated in early September of 89. And my roommate that I've been sharing an apartment with, he moved to the other side of the country, so I had full rent to pay. And I knew, and I was in Seattle at the time, I knew that, I fantasized that I could freelance assist photographers in town and work part-time. So I got a part-time job at a local rental darkroom gallery space. I was working there like 24 hours a week, and at the same time promoting myself as an assistant for commercial photographers. And it took all of, a month and a half of, when a photographer would call me and say, hey, are you available Tuesday or Thursday? And me not being able to do it, that I realized, and not being able to do it because I was working, before I realized this isn't going to fly. I'm not going to be able to pursue this career, and the early paths to that career are to be assisting for established photographers. So it's like, by December, I'm like, what am I going to do? I can't afford rent if I'm not working. And my school loans will be coming due in another 3 months. I'm going to have to start paying those too. and I'll have to work full time, and then I can just kiss this goodbye as far as freelance and pursuing my career. And that's when it hit me. And also it helped that someone I was working with, one of the instructors at the rental darkroom, had an old Dodge van that he had turned into a camper. He built the interior himself. Really nice job of all the things. And it was breaking down on him. He was losing faith in it. He wanted a new vehicle. And we talked enough that, I was like, well, hey, I might be interested in buying it. And he's like, Rich, it's I'm trying to remember his name. It's on the tip of my brain. That's how much I wing these videos. I'm just like going, oh God, it's driving me nuts. Anyway, I might remember before I'm done. He was reluctant to sell it to me because he knew it wasn't working right. And I convinced him that I think I can fix it. I need a van because I want to do this thing. And so he sold it to me. He sold it to me for $800. And it was beautiful. It was in great shape. It wasn't even a 100,000 mile van, and it was having trouble. Now, I had some mechanical background, and he did not. So I have to admit, I had ideas, judging from what he was telling me, from what I heard when he'd drive it, what was going on. And I rolled that dice and bought it and limped it back home to the garage under a building I was renting an apartment in. There was a mechanic shop there, and I'd made good friends with him. He let me have it in there for the weekend, and I pulled the intake manifold off because I suspected a vacuum leak, put in a new intake manifold gasket, new carb gaskets, rebuilt the carb, the whole deal. She fired up and ran like a dream. And the next time he saw it, purring like a kitten, and asked me about it, he wasn't upset, but he's like, gosh, damn it. This was a special one. It was a 3/4 ton, 78 Dodge van, cargo van, and it was a factory 4-speed with a floor shifter. Way cool, rig. So I immediately gave notice to my apartment. I don't even remember what my security deposit was. Back then it was probably next to nothing. I know I lost it because I didn't give them enough notice. And I had hardly anything anyway. Everything I owned fit in the van, and I moved in. December 31st was my first night. 1989, December 31st. First night of van life. And it worked out beautifully. I quit my job, I think within a month, and started really promoting hard my freelance and let all these guys know who had gotten a hold of me before when I couldn't work that I was totally free now. I was not working elsewhere. And boom, I was working. I was freelance assisting. So the first time I did van life for real, it was totally a career move. You know, it was the only means I could see for me to be absolutely free to freelance assist and to freelance shoot and everything. And I just threw myself into it. And I found I was comfortable with that lifestyle really quickly. It turns out, you know, I have the right personality for this. And not everybody does. It does take a unique personality to adapt to and be comfortable and thrive with vehicle life. You know, it's just not, it's very unconventional, has a lot of unique challenges. And if you don't enjoy the enjoyable stuff about it, then you ain't going to deal with the difficult stuff regarding van life. So I was in that van. Well, my freelance work just blew up. I ended up within a year full-time studio manager for Phil Banco, photographer in Seattle, who I greatly admired, and his mentorship was huge. Really big deal for me. He's an amazing human being, super talented artist and photographer. Phil, you rock. You and Robin, your whole family, you're wonderful. And but after about 2 years after getting out of college and doing well in Seattle, I was just sick of the overcast. Having grown up in Central Washington, I wanted the sun. I found most weekends where I had at least 3 days off, I'd just head east to get into the sunshine. And eventually I just realized I don't like living in Seattle. I'd had enough at that point. And here I was living in a van where obviously I don't have to give any rental notice. It doesn't change anything. I just have to move to wherever I want to be, have enough money in the bank to do so, and carry me until I get a new job or do whatever. So I did. In 1992, in the spring, I moved to Wenatchee, moved back to that area that I'd grown up in, and got a job at the local airport, fueling airplanes, and I didn't touch a camera for a year. And this was another really cool thing about van life, is the flexibility it gives you to move and to up and try something different. I mean, the only expenses I had were food, fuel, and my school loan payments, which were significant, but any job, any entry-level job would have covered those expenses back then. And so I was in Wenatchee, and for a year, like I said, I didn't touch a camera. After about a year of fueling planes and learning about aviation and flying a bunch, I decided, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to get going on photography again. And I started my own freelance commercial photography business based in Wenatchee. And it didn't take long to grow. It grew really quick with portraits and with commercial work. And again, living lean in the vehicle is what really made that possible for me to just pursue all out and full time. So we'll just fast forward a bunch of years there. In 95, I got married, had my first child. That was the end of van life for a while. We rented an apartment and eventually bought a double wide, new mobile home, manufactured home, whatever, set up in a park in East Wenatchee in 96. And lived life there, continued building the business, expanded into Yakima and Tri-Cities. Then I got the job at Central Washington University, and we moved to Ellensburg in 2002. So it was really actually a little difficult. I mean, I loved being a parent. I loved all that. I loved what was going on, but I missed living super simple and compact. In the back of my mind, I did. And I always felt, someday I may be doing this again. Didn't know if I'd be doing it with my wife, down the road, or what happened, as it goes. That, ended in 2016. But I had an inkling it would come again, the circumstances, somehow, some way. Of course, I didn't expect it to be something so upheaving of my life, like separating from my wife, ending up divorced. In 2016, I was divorced, and things at my job at the university were shifting that I wasn't as happy with. And since I'd pretty much given up everything of super value that we had owned, because my wife had been a full-time mom and committed to that, she got the resources that we built because she deserved them. She'd been working all the time, wasn't earning Social Security, credit like I was. So the house, all the assets we had, I felt those should go to her. That was her investment. And so I had very little, but I had a skill and a profession. Yet I was not real happy with what was going on at work. And I had been inspired by my experiences at Burning Man about the gifting, was doing the portrait gifting, once a year. And it just started to congeal that, okay, how can I make this happen? I don't have to follow the path that I had been planning all those years. Everything has changed. Horizon's wiped clean. And I want to do this full-time gifting, and I want to travel before I'm, too old to do so. So one quick side note about this too old to do so. That was based on the concept that most people, after they're divorced and take a huge financial hit, they will bear down to rebuild that wealth, to rebuild to whatever degree they can what they lost, and get back in that, great financial position they were in before their whole world came apart, And I was not willing to give up that. Okay, that's going to mean like 15 more years at the university. So I'll be done when I'm like 70. I'm like, nah. And I don't think 70 is old. I have 70-year-old friends that are amazing. My dad is 87. Yeah. And I mean, he's unbelievable. So it wasn't as hung up about the years. It's just like, do I want to give another 15 years of my life to this? just to build up that, what I assume will be financial security, and assume I'll be healthy enough to enjoy it by the time I can retire at 70 or 68? Nah, I wasn't. Not when I looked at it. Not after all the personal work I'd done. Not after all the reset in my life of my priorities. Became a pretty easy decision that I got to get out sooner rather than later. I don't think I had to think 5 minutes about it before I started thinking about, whoa, I could do a van again. And then I had the dream that inspired all this and saw this interior of the back in my dream. And then I started looking in earnest. And I wasn't expecting a launch till like 2020, but stuff at work just accelerated that. I was too unhappy. I'm like, okay, as soon as my son graduates high school and we can both leave, because he was living with me finishing high school, I'm doing it. And that was 2018 in the summer. And so I've now am in my 6th year in this rig, living full-time in it, and I've loved it. I've loved it, even with the difficulties and the frustrations mechanically here and there, because this is a mechanic's ongoing project kind of vehicle. I love the lifestyle. It suits me so well, sometimes it worries me. But again, living in a rig like this is what's made it possible for me to jump full-time into Jackdaw, into the gifting, into this work, this philanthropy, and the listening I do. I couldn't afford to do all that if I had rent and all the expenses associated with rent, and I'd be tied down to one market, one area. And because of my experiences from 90 to 95 living in the van, I already knew I can do this. And I built out this interior and built this rig with this whole deal in mind. So I knew what works for me, and I built it that way. And all I have ever had to change about in here is just how I sort things. The actual build, the way I laid it out, has worked just as I expected. It's worked beautifully for me. And if you're this kind of personality and you can tolerate not having your own private property other than your vehicle, then the flexibility and the opportunities that living like this gives you are unbelievable, you know. Now I realize it's different for women than men. It's different based on your age, different based on the vehicle type that you're doing it in. I have very privileged experiences because of this being a vintage vehicle. I get treated way better than I ever did in the van, even though my van was nice and nice looking. It was a somewhat modern vehicle by the standards of the day. So, but van life wasn't a thing back then. So if you had a clean van in the early 90s doing this and you were discreet, no one ever thought somebody could be sleeping in there at night, you know. So things have changed. People know about van life. They see the derelict type vans all around, you know. If your rig looks like hell, it's more challenging. If you have a nice vehicle that you take good care of, you're discreet, you generally won't have a lot of trouble. You'll get the knock. You'll still get the knock eventually, but the police are usually really nice, especially if your rig is all up to date on tabs, you know, your license, and it's clean, it's in good order. They've always been polite. It's never been a problem. They never even ask for your ID because they've already run your plates, so they know you're legit, and they just let you know, I'm sorry you can't be here, tell you where you can be, and you roll on, you know. And anybody who's done this life for a while knows you have to have different spots in mind. You have to have thought it through. But yeah, it works amazing, the flexibility, you know. If you're out of debt and you don't have any debt, which I don't, you can live really lean, and you can you'll pour your energy into something like I have Jackdaw that has no guarantees, because you know you can live so lean. And yeah, I'm working through savings, working through my retirement savings, but I never could have considered that if I was going to have rent along the way. I just couldn't have. And so yes, both times I've done this full time, it's been a means to an end to achieve my goals, but at the same time, it's been something I love. And I think you would know pretty quick. I get that question all the time. It's like people are like, I'd love to do this, but I just don't know if I could deal with it. And it's pretty simple to test yourself out. If you can go out in like rent a camper van or have a van that you could live in and just go do a 2-week trip where you're not traveling every day, so that you can kind of simulate life if you're, say, working somewhere, and don't make it all glorious campgrounds. Make it like it would be if you're doing this full time. If you can do 2 weeks like that and come out of it and still be jazzed about it, then you may be a candidate, So that's a really good test to try out. But again, not for everybody, but for those that it is for, it's a really fun lifestyle. And I know I'll be happy to live like this until the day I either physically can't, or all of a sudden things change and I want to root somewhere. I'm nowhere near that yet, but anyway, that's just kind of the deal for me. Yes, a means to an end helps me afford to do what I'm doing, but also I just plain like it. I'm one of those people that thrives living this way. So yeah, I just felt like throwing that out there, giving you a little background history of my experience with van life. I'll probably do other videos down the road that literally talk about a specific aspect of van life. And if you're interested in that, put in the comments what you'd like me to address in specific. Because I'm in my 11th year of doing this in my second vehicle, with a big gap in between, as I told you. But Lord knows I got plenty of experience at it now. And happy to share, happy to answer any questions you have. Just hit me up and I'll answer them. So anyway, that's it for this week. I hope you've been able to hear me over the wind and I haven't just wasted my time. Audio-wise, I think it's probably okay. So y'all take good care of yourselves. I'll catch you next time.